The vast emptiness of the Kuiper Belt stretched endlessly in all directions, its darkness broken only by the faint glimmer of distant stars and the massive shapes of 300 alien ships floating motionless in space. Inside the command vessel, Captain Reed of the First Fleet paced the bridge, his four-fingered hands clasped tightly behind his back. "Engineering report," he called out, his voice steady despite the growing concern in his chest. "Critical failure in all quantum drive systems, sir," replied the chief engineer through the ship's communication system. "The cold out here. It's unlike anything our systems were designed to handle. The backup drives are freezing up too." Reed stopped his pacing and looked out through the massive viewing window. His fleet, the pride of the Galactic Alliance, carrying over 2 million civilians to their new colony, was stuck in this primitive solar system. The emergency stop had seemed like a good idea when they detected the drive system problems, but now they were stranded in a region of space that no civilized species would ever choose to inhabit. "Status of the rest of the fleet?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "All ships reporting similar failures, sir. The cold is spreading through our systems faster than the thermal regulators can compensate. We've lost 30% of our power generation capacity in the last hour alone." Reed's second-in-command, Officer Lane, approached with a data tablet in her hands. "Sir, we need to make a decision. At current rates of system failure, we'll lose life support in 48 hours. The captain turned to face the tactical display showing their location relative to the nearest inhabited world, a small blue planet called Earth. Their database listed it as a developing world, barely space-capable, still using chemical rockets and what they considered primitive technology. "What about our distress beacon?" Reed asked. "The nearest Alliance rescue fleet is 3 months away," Lane replied. "We don't have that kind of time." Reed closed his eyes for a moment, considering their options. The thought of asking primitives for help was almost physically painful, but he had 2 million lives to think about. "Show me what we know about these humans," he ordered. The main screen filled with information. The humans were a young species, only recently venturing into space. They still fought among themselves, hadn't even unified their planet yet. But something caught Reed's eye: their habitats. Humans had built stations in the deepest oceans, constructed bases in their planet's most frozen regions, and somehow managed to keep their primitive space station running for decades. A notification flashed on the screen: another system failure. The temperature in the cargo holds was dropping rapidly. "Sir," Lane said quietly, "these humans, they work in conditions not unlike what we're facing now. Their entire planet experiences temperature variations that would shut down most of our technology." Reed nodded slowly. "They live in the cold, work in the vacuum of space with basic tools, and keep their machinery running in conditions that would freeze our most advanced systems." The bridge fell silent as another alert sounded. 3 more ships had lost primary power. "Send the signal," Reed finally ordered. "Contact Earth." Lane's fingers moved quickly over her console. "What should we say?" Reed straightened his uniform, his pride taking a back seat to necessity. "Tell them the truth. Tell them we're stranded, our technology is failing, and we need their help. Tell them we have 2 million civilians who will die without their assistance." The message was composed and transmitted toward Earth in all major human languages. As they waited for a response, Reed watched the small blue planet through the viewing window. These humans, these primitives who still used combustion engines and mechanical tools, who built things with their hands instead of molecular assemblers, they were now his people's only hope. "Sir," Lane called out, surprise evident in her voice, "we're receiving a response already." The message was simple, direct, and would later be remembered as the beginning of humanity's entrance onto the galactic stage. "This is Earth Space Command. We hear you. Help is on the way. Please transmit your coordinates and hold on." Reed felt something he hadn't expected: hope. Perhaps these humans, with their crude tools and primitive methods, could see solutions that his people's advanced technology had blinded them to. Now they just had to survive long enough to find out. The emergency meeting room at Earth Space Command was packed. Military officers, scientists, and engineers from around the world sat around a large table, their faces lit by the blue glow of screens showing the alien fleet's situation. Director Wilson stood at the front of the room, pointing to the thermal imaging data from the stranded ships. Their fleet is freezing up. Their fancy technology can't handle the extreme cold of deep space without their main engines running. 2 million civilians, muttered Jack Thompson, head of Arctic Base Operations. He ran his weathered hand through his gray hair. That's as many people as we have in some of our biggest cities. The room buzzed with quiet conversations until someone cleared their throat. All heads turned to look at Mike Russell, a deep-sea engineering expert who had spent 15 years fixing oil rigs in the North Sea. He wasn't supposed to be in this high-level meeting, but his boss had insisted he come. "Those ships," Mike said, pointing at the screen, "they're not so different from our deep-sea platforms. Isolated environment, extreme cold, need for precise repairs in impossible conditions." He stood up and walked to the main display. "We deal with this stuff every day." A military officer scoffed. "This is advanced alien technology we're talking about. What could deep-sea welders possibly know about working in deadly environments with limited resources?" Mike interrupted. "About fixing complex machinery while wearing suits that barely let you move. About staying alive when the smallest mistake means death." He tapped the screen. "That's exactly what we know." Director Wilson raised her hand for silence. "Mike's right. The aliens' problem isn't that they need better technology. They need people who understand how to work in these conditions." She pressed a button, and new images appeared on the screen. "We've been running simulations. Their ship's materials aren't that different from our advanced alloys. We can work with them." "But how do we get there?" someone asked. "Their fleet is past Mars orbit." "We've got the new deep space vessels," Wilson replied. "They were meant for the Mars colony mission next year, but we can have them ready in 48 hours. They're not as fancy as alien ships, but they're tough and reliable." Mike studied the alien ship schematics. "We'll need a special team. People used to working in impossible conditions." He turned to Jack. "Arctic base engineers who know how to keep things running at -60 degrees. Jack nodded. "I know just the people. They can fix anything with basic tools and frozen fingers." "Deep-sea welders too," Mike added. "People who can make repairs while wearing bulky suits in zero visibility." Director Wilson looked around the room. "Any objections to putting Mike in charge of the repair operation?" The military officer who had scoffed earlier raised his hand. "With all due respect, shouldn't we send our top scientists? Our best minds?" "We are sending our best minds," Wilson responded firmly. "People who solve deadly problems with their hands and basic tools every single day. The aliens have enough scientists. What they need now are fixers." The next 36 hours were a blur of activity. 3 deep space vessels were prepared, loaded with tools and supplies that would seem primitive to the aliens. Manual welding gear, mechanical winches, basic cutting tools, and spare parts that could be modified by hand. The team came together quickly. Deep-sea welders, Arctic engineers, space mechanics, and survival specialists. They packed thermal suits designed for Earth's harshest environments, modified for space use. As Mike supervised the loading of equipment onto the rescue ships, he received a message from the alien fleet. Their captain appeared on the screen, looking concerned. "We've reviewed your rescue plan," the alien said. "These tools you're bringing, they're so basic. Are you sure they'll be enough?" Mike smiled, thinking of all the impossible repairs he'd made in the crushing depths of the ocean. "Sometimes basic is better, Captain. Complex solutions break in complex ways. Simple tools, skilled hands, and human ingenuity. That's what's going to save your fleet." The alien captain didn't look convinced, but they were out of options and out of time. 12 hours later, Mike stood with his team as the countdown began for launch. They were about to attempt the biggest repair job in human history, armed with little more than their skills, their experience, and their determination to save 2 million lives. "Ready?" he asked his team. They nodded, their faces showing the quiet confidence of people who had spent their lives doing the impossible. The rockets ignited, and humanity's first rescue mission to save an alien civilization began. Mike's jaw dropped as their rescue ship approached the alien fleet. Through the viewport, he could see hundreds of massive ships, each one bigger than Earth's largest aircraft carriers. Their sleek designs made the human rescue vessels look like rusty old trucks in comparison. "Looking pretty fancy for broken-down ships," muttered Pete, one of the deep-sea welders on Mike's team. He was checking his modified diving suit, now adapted for space use. The radio crackled. "Human rescue vessels, you are cleared to dock with the main engineering bay," came the alien controller's voice. Mike watched through the window as their ship carefully moved towards an opening in the side of the massive alien command vessel. "Remember, everyone, we're here to fix ships, not to gawk at their technology. Focus on the job, just like any other repair mission." The docking procedure was smooth, despite using what the aliens had called crude docking mechanisms. As the airlock cycled, Mike led his team through, carrying their basic tool bags. They were met by a group of alien engineers who stood nearly 7 feet tall with silvery skin that seemed to shimmer under the emergency lights. The alien chief engineer, who introduced himself as Technical Director First Class, looked at their equipment with obvious concern. "These are your repair tools?" he asked, pointing at Mike's bag of wrenches, welding gear, and mechanical diagnostic equipment. "Yes," Mike replied simply. "Now show us where you're having the worst freezing problems." The aliens led them through corridors that were gradually getting colder. Their breath was visible in the air, and frost was forming on the walls. Mike noticed the aliens were wearing what looked like thin environmental suits, clearly struggling with the cold that their technology usually kept at bay. "Here," the technical director said, stopping at a massive door. "This is our main power distribution hub. The quantum field generators are failing due to the extreme cold, and our molecular reconstruction units can't." "Skip the fancy names," Mike interrupted. "Just show us what's freezing and what it's supposed to do." The aliens exchanged glances but opened the door. Inside, Mike and his team saw something that made perfect sense to them. It was essentially a giant engine room, albeit with technology far beyond Earth's level. But the principles were the same: power generation, distribution systems, and cooling mechanisms. "Pete, check those joints," Mike ordered, pointing to where frost was building up. "Jack, get temperature readings. Bill, start mapping the power flow." The aliens watched in confusion as the humans moved around their engine room with basic tools, touching things with gloved hands, using simple mechanical gauges instead of quantum scanners. "Wait," the technical director called out as Pete prepared to open a panel. "You need molecular analysis tools too." Pete simply knocked on the panel with a wrench, listening to the sound. "Frozen solid in there," he said. "The coolant's turned to ice. Classic Cascade Failure." The aliens stared in disbelief. "How can you know that without scanning?" "Because we've seen this 1,000 times in deep-sea operations," Mike explained while checking another system. "When systems get this cold, they all fail in similar ways. Your technology is more advanced, but the physics is the same." Over the next few hours, the human team worked steadily, using their experience from Earth's harshest environments. They found ways to bypass the aliens' frozen automated systems with manual controls. They used basic thermal wraps, technology that hadn't changed much since the 20th century, to protect critical components. The technical director watched in amazement as the humans managed to stabilize an entire section of the power distribution system using what his people would consider primitive tools and methods. "I don't understand," he admitted to Mike. "Our best engineers couldn't solve this. How are you doing it with such basic equipment?" Mike looked up from where he was helping Pete weld a support brace. "Because we're used to working with what we have. When you're at the bottom of the ocean, or in the middle of the Arctic, You can't always rely on fancy tools. Sometimes you need to feel the problem, understand it with your hands, and fix it the old-fashioned way. The alien engineer watched as frost stopped forming on the walls, and power readings began to stabilize. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we have become too dependent on our advanced technology." "No shame in that," Mike replied, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold. "But it's good to remember that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." As they moved to the next section that needed repairs, the aliens began to look at their human rescuers with new respect. These weren't the primitives they had expected. These were survivors, problem solvers who had learned to thrive in conditions that would shut down even the most advanced technology. And they were just getting started. After 24 hours of non-stop work, Mike and his team gathered in what the aliens had turned into a makeshift human break room. Steam rose from their coffee cups, a simple luxury they'd insisted on bringing from Earth. "We fixed the immediate problems," Mike said, spreading out a hand-drawn map of the ship's systems on the table. "But we need a permanent solution. These patches won't hold forever." Pete nodded, his tired eyes studying the diagram. "The aliens' fancy systems are just too delicate. One thing fails, everything fails." The door slid open, and the technical director entered with two of his engineers. They had started copying the humans' habit of wearing thicker protective gear, learning that comfort mattered less than functionality in crisis situations. "We've been studying your repair methods," the technical director said, placing a holographic projector on the table. "They're surprisingly effective. But surely there must be a better way than these mechanical fixes." Mike took a long sip of his coffee, an idea forming in his mind. "Actually, I think there is. But you're not going to like it." He stood up and walked to the hologram, which showed the ship's power distribution network. "Your systems are amazing when they work. The problem is, they're too perfect. There's no room for error, no way to keep running when conditions aren't perfect." Using his marker, Mike drew on the table's surface next to the hologram. "Look at how we build things for deep-sea operations. Multiple backup systems, manual overrides, simple mechanical solutions that can't be shut down by a computer failure." The technical director leaned forward, his silver skin reflecting the hologram's blue light. "You suggest we make our technology less advanced?" "No," Mike replied, drawing more diagrams. "I suggest we combine our approaches. Keep your advanced systems for normal operations, but add our type of backup systems for emergencies." Pete stood up and pointed to a specific section of the ship. "Like here, we could install manual bypass valves. When the quantum whatever fails, you pull a lever, and basic mechanical systems take over. Not as efficient, but guaranteed to work." The alien engineers looked skeptical, but Mike could see the technical director was thinking hard. Over the past day, he'd watched humans solve problems his people thought impossible, using tools they considered obsolete. "Show me," the technical director finally said. The next 12 hours were a flurry of activity. Humans and aliens worked side by side, creating something entirely new. They installed mechanical backup systems alongside advanced technology. Simple pressure gauges next to quantum sensors. Manual controls beside AI interfaces. Mike stood in the engine room, watching as Pete taught an alien engineer how to use a basic welding torch. "Sometimes," he explained to the fascinated alien, "you need to feel the metal, understand how it's behaving. No scanner can tell you that." In another section, Jack from the Arctic team was showing aliens how to install thermal protection systems designed for Earth's polar research stations. "See, simple materials, but they've kept humans alive in -60 degrees for decades." The technical director approached Mike as they finished installing the last backup system. "This is not how we usually do things," he admitted. "Our engineering principles focus on advancing technology, not going backward." Mike wiped grease from his hands with a rag. Another simple tool the aliens had started appreciating. It's not going backward. It's acknowledging that sometimes the old ways work best. Having a backup plan isn't primitive. It's smart. They ran the first test of the hybrid system. The aliens watched in amazement as their ship's power network operated more stably than ever. When they deliberately shut down the main quantum systems, the mechanical backups kicked in smoothly, keeping critical systems running. "It's like having a safety net," the technical director said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "All our advancement, but with human reliability." "Exactly," Mike replied. "Your technology is incredible. But out here in deep space, just like in Earth's harshest places, you need systems that won't give up when things get tough." News of the successful hybrid systems spread through the fleet. Other ships began requesting similar modifications. The aliens started learning human repair techniques, while humans learned to work with advanced technology. It was more than just fixing ships. It was two different approaches to engineering coming together, creating something better than either could achieve alone. As Mike watched aliens and humans working together, he realized they weren't just saving a stranded fleet anymore. They were teaching these advanced beings something humanity had learned through centuries of struggling against harsh environments. Sometimes the best technology isn't the most advanced. It's the most reliable. The warning alarms started during what should have been a routine repair cycle. Mike was teaching a group of alien engineers about manual bypass systems when the emergency lights flashed red. Multiple system failures detected. The ship's AI announced. Cascade effect spreading through the fleet. Main power grid collapse imminent. The technical director rushed into the engine room, his silver skin almost white with concern. "We're losing everything. The quantum field is collapsing across all ships." Mike grabbed his emergency toolkit. "What triggered it?" "A solar flare," the alien engineer explained, his hands moving frantically over control panels that were already going dark. "Much stronger than usual for this system. Our sensors didn't detect it in time." Through the viewport, Mike could see other ships in the fleet starting to go dark. The beautiful, sleek vessels that had seemed so powerful were being knocked out one by one. "The backup systems we installed?" Mike asked quickly. "They're working, but they can't handle the full load. We need the main quantum systems back online, or..." The technical director paused. "Or 2 million people will freeze to death in the next 6 hours." Mike keyed his radio. "Pete, Jack, get to emergency stations. All human repair teams on alert." He turned to the technical director. "We need to get to the main power core. Now." They ran through darkening corridors, their footsteps echoing on metal floors that were already starting to frost over. The temperature was dropping fast. When they reached the central power chamber, the sight was worse than Mike had feared. The massive quantum core, usually glowing with blue energy, was dark and covered in ice crystals. Around it, alien engineers worked frantically with their advanced tools, but nothing seemed to help. "Your quantum systems are completely dead," Mike said, studying the core. "The solar flare must have disrupted the field harmonics. Without the quantum core, nothing works," the technical director said desperately. "Even our new backup systems need some power to function." Mike looked at the frozen core, then at his toolkit. An idea formed. Crazy, dangerous, but possible. "Pete," he called over the radio, "bring your deep-sea welding gear to the main core. All of it." "You can't be serious," the technical director said, realizing what Mike was planning. Using primitive welding equipment on a quantum core, it could explode. "Maybe," Mike agreed, already putting on his heaviest protective suit. "But those 2 million people will definitely die if we do nothing. Sometimes you have to risk everything on a crazy idea." Pete arrived with the welding equipment, and Jack brought thermal regulators from the Arctic stations. They worked quickly, setting up their equipment around the quantum core. "Here's the plan," Mike explained to both human and alien engineers. "We're going to use the welding gear to heat the core's outer shell. The thermal regulators will help control the temperature rise. If we do it right, we might be able to jumpstart the quantum field." "And if you're wrong?" the technical director asked. "Then we'll probably be the first ones to die when it explodes," Mike said simply. Everyone who's staying, suit up. The rest, get to safety. Not a single person left the room. The next hour was the most intense of Mike's life. Working in near darkness, fighting against rapidly dropping temperatures, they executed their desperate plan. Pete handled the main welding, his experienced hands making precise movements despite the bulky suit. Jack monitored the thermal readings, making constant adjustments. The aliens helped where they could, learning to use human tools on the fly. Their advanced knowledge of the core's systems, combined with human practical skills, might be the only thing that could save them all. Core temperature rising, Jack reported, approaching critical point. Mike watched the temperature gauges, his breath frozen in his helmet. A little more. Hold it steady. Suddenly, a faint blue glow appeared in the core's center. It flickered, weak at first, then grew stronger. Quantum field detecting. The technical director shouted, "It's stabilizing." The glow spread through the core, then through the power conduits. Around them, systems began coming back online. Through the viewport, they could see other ships in the fleet lighting up one by one. Mike finally allowed himself to breathe normally again. "Start running full diagnostics. We need to make sure it holds." The technical director placed a hand on Mike's shoulder. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen." "Sometimes," Mike replied with a tired smile, "they're the same thing. Especially when you're trying to save lives." As emergency crews spread through the fleet to deal with the aftermath, Mike looked at his team, humans and aliens working side by side, covered in frost but alive. They had just proven that even the most advanced technology could be saved by simple human determination and the willingness to try the impossible. 3 days after the crisis, Mike stood in the fleet's main observation deck with Captain Reed and the technical director. Below them, human repair teams moved between ships, teaching alien crews how to maintain the new hybrid systems that had saved their lives. "I must admit," Captain Reed said, watching a human engineer demonstrate a manual repair technique to a group of fascinated aliens. "When we first called Earth for help, I thought we were desperate. Now I realize we were fortunate." Mike smiled, remembering how the aliens had initially looked at their primitive tools with doubt. Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who've had to learn things the hard way. The observation deck's door opened, and Pete walked in, followed by several alien engineering students. They were all carrying basic toolkits now, just like their human instructors. "You should see them, Mike," Pete said proudly. "They're getting really good at manual repairs. One of them even figured out how to improve our welding technique using some of their technology." The technical director nodded with obvious pride. "We're learning that true advancement isn't about having the most complex solution. It's about having the right solution." They watched as a cargo ship successfully tested its new backup systems. The vessel's lights dimmed as it switched from quantum power to mechanical backup, then smoothly returned to normal operation. It was a perfect blend of human reliability and alien technology. "Our council wants to understand more about how humans work," Captain Reed said. "Not just your technology, but your way of thinking. How did you develop this? What do you call it?" "Common sense," Mike replied with a laugh. "When you're working deep underwater or in the Arctic cold, you learn fast that fancy solutions aren't always the best ones. Nature doesn't care about how advanced your technology is. It cares about what works." A group of alien children had gathered at a nearby viewport, watching the repair teams with excitement. One of them was holding a simple wrench, trying to copy the way the humans used their tools. "That's what really surprised us," the technical director admitted. "We thought we were so advanced, but we had forgotten some of the most basic principles. Your people don't just solve problems. You understand them from the ground up." Mike walked to a display panel showing the fleet's status. Every ship now had human-style backup systems installed. Every crew had been trained in basic mechanical repairs. What had started as an emergency rescue had turned into the biggest teaching operation in human history. "You know what's really interesting?" Mike said. "Your crews are already improving our methods. They're finding ways to combine their advanced knowledge with our practical experience, creating something better than either of us had before. Captain Reed nodded thoughtfully. Our scientists are calling it practical innovation, the combination of advanced technology with fundamental understanding. They say it could change how we approach engineering throughout the galaxy. Just then, an alien engineer rushed in, excited. "Sir, we've managed to modify the human welding techniques for use with our quantum fields. It's increasing efficiency by 300%. The technical director turned to Mike with an expression that could only be described as a smile. "You see, we're not just learning your methods, we're building on them. Together." Mike watched as more ships tested their new systems. Each one represented countless hours of humans and aliens working together, teaching each other, learning to combine the best of both worlds. "You know," Pete said, cleaning some tools nearby, "when we first got here, I thought we were just going to fix some broken ships and go home. But we're doing something much bigger, aren't we?" Captain Reed placed his four-fingered hands on the viewport. "You're teaching us something we had forgotten in our rush to advance technology. The importance of understanding the basics, of being able to solve problems with your hands and your mind, not just with computers and quantum fields." "And you're teaching us too," Mike replied, "showing us how to take our practical knowledge to the next level, proving that sometimes the best solution is a mix of old and new." As they stood there watching the combined crews at work, Mike realized they had done more than save a stranded fleet. They had bridged a gap between two very different approaches to technology and problem-solving. And in doing so, they had opened up possibilities that neither civilization had imagined before. The universe, it seemed, had room for both quantum fields and simple wrenches. Sometimes you just needed to know when to use which one. 1 month after the initial distress call, Mike stood in Earth Space Command's main conference room. The massive screen showed the alien fleet, now repaired and ready to continue their journey. But they weren't leaving empty-handed. "The exchange program has been approved," Director Wilson announced to the gathered crowd. 50 human engineers will join the fleet as permanent instructors, and 50 alien engineers will stay on Earth to study at our deep-sea and Arctic facilities. Mike watched as Pete and Jack signed up immediately to join the fleet. The adventures of the past month had changed everyone involved. Human engineers had learned to work with advanced technology, while alien engineers had discovered the value of practical skills. The technical director, now wearing a customized Earth-style work uniform, stepped forward to address the room. "A month ago, we thought we were rescuing a primitive species technology. Instead, you rescued us from our own over-reliance on automation. The galaxy will never be the same." He activated a holographic display, showing new ship designs that were already being implemented across the fleet. Every vessel now featured both quantum technology and human-style mechanical backups. Engineering rooms had both advanced AI systems and simple manual tools. But the biggest change, the technical director continued, isn't in our ships. It's in how we think about problem-solving. Thanks to humans, we're learning to trust our hands and instincts again, not just our computers. Captain Reed's image appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the fleet. "We're establishing the first human engineering academy in our home system. Every ship in the Galactic Alliance will now have human-trained practical engineers on board. What you've taught us about resilience and adaptability is too valuable to ignore." Mike thought back to that first day, when they'd arrived at the stranded fleet with their primitive tools. Now those same tools were being mass-produced by alien factories, enhanced with advanced materials but keeping their simple, reliable designs. "We've received requests from 17 different alien civilizations," Director Wilson added. "They all want to learn what we call the human way of engineering. Our deep-sea welders and Arctic engineers are becoming the most sought-after instructors in the galaxy." The room erupted in applause as the first group of alien students entered. They were wearing Earth-style work clothes, carrying both advanced scanners and basic tool belts. They looked ready to learn, to get their hands dirty understanding how things worked from the ground up. Mike stepped forward to address both the humans in the room and the aliens watching from their ships. A wise person once told me that the best technology isn't always the most advanced, it's the most reliable. What we've created together proves that. We've shown that progress doesn't always mean making things more complex. Sometimes it means remembering the simple solutions that have kept us alive in harsh conditions for centuries. The technical director nodded in agreement. Our quantum cores now have manual backup systems. Our AI interfaces have mechanical overrides. And most importantly, our engineers now understand that technology is just a tool. The real power lies in the mind that uses it. As the meeting concluded, Mike looked at the next generation of human and alien engineers talking excitedly about future projects. Some discussed improving deep-sea welding techniques with quantum field assistance. Others planned new hybrid systems for Arctic research stations. Captain Reed's final message summed up what they had all learned. When we sent that distress call, we thought we were asking for help from a less advanced species. Instead, we found teachers who showed us that true advancement isn't just about having better technology. It's about understanding the principles behind it, being able to work with your hands, and never forgetting that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. The alien fleet departed a week later, carrying human engineers to share their knowledge across the galaxy. But they left behind more than just improved technology. They left a legacy of cooperation, a reminder that progress comes in many forms, and the understanding that every civilization, no matter how advanced, has something valuable to teach. As Mike watched the fleet disappear into the darkness of space, he smiled. Humanity had taken its first steps into the galactic community not as primitive newcomers, but as respected teachers of practical wisdom. And somewhere out there, a deep-sea welder was probably showing an alien engineer how to fix a quantum drive with nothing more than basic tools and human ingenuity. The future, it seemed, would be built with both wrenches and quantum fields. And that was exactly how it should be.